The far left now seems to believe that socialism is good, capitalism bad. New York City's candidate for mayor is a self-proclaimed democratic socialist. The left thinks socialist policies they support, such as rent control and minimum wage, are inherently good. So much so that they don't tolerate criticisms, questions, comments, or debate of those policies by anybody, let alone some crude capitalist.
You want answers!
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
Any analysis into whether or not those policies actually work, actually create positive results, well, that's just evil. You just need to shut up and go along. Don't be interrupting with those pesky facts.
That's the fact, Jack! That's the fact, Jack!
The left, they denigrate those who oppose them, saying they are morally wrong. Open civil debate used to be the way we reasoned our way to the best results, but these socialist policies are to them apparently beyond debate. They are so inherently good that there is no need to measure actual results. They say, come on, wouldn't we be better off if rents were cheaper and everyone was paid a living wage? What idiot could disagree with that? Capitalism, they say, is so morally bankrupt that those who support it are immoral. They throw the religion card up on the table in support of their side of that argument, saying socialism is Christian. Capitalism? Yeah, not so much. Testing that hypothesis is the subject of today's real story. I want to refer today to a cartoon in my local paper, the Dallas Morning News, published August 5th, that tells the readers that the Bible is woke, which is, in this context, calling it left. If you can't see the cartoon, you got a librarian-looking individual sitting there and a sign on the desk that says, "No woke books here," and tossing the Bible in the trash. Apparently, a lot of people believe that. For example, I was listening to a right-leaning speaker being cross-examined by a student on a college campus who insisted that Christ's teachings supported socialism, but not capitalism.
I think there's a lot of admirable things about what Jesus talks about. Caring for the poor, trying to heal the sick, and things like that. I was just curious, for your faith and political beliefs, how does that reconcile? I feel like taking away and advocating for reducing welfare and advocating for kids not having free and reduced lunches and not wanting to expand that program, that kind of seems antithetical to the whole message of Jesus, in my opinion.
That student seemed to have the same views as the political cartoonist from my local paper. Socialism is Christian, capitalism is not. Now, I've written a book, We've Got Issues, How You Can Stand Strong for America's Soul and Sanity, in which I advocate for a return to our religious heritage. The real story issue is one I care about. Now, of course, I'm no theologian, but I can read, and I got out my Bible to see what it said about all this. What I found may surprise you, although it really shouldn't. My digging around also led me to a speech by the profound late U.S. Supreme Court Justice Scalia. His words resonated with me, so I share them with you.
The allure of socialism for the Christian, I think, is that it means well. It is or appears to be altruistic. It promises assistance from the state for the poor and public provision of all the necessities of life, from maternity care to geriatric care, and from kindergarten through university. Capitalism, on the other hand, promises nothing from the state except the opportunity to succeed or fail. The issue is not whether there should be provision for the poor, but rather the degree to which that provision should be made through the coercive power of the state. Christ said, after all, that you should give your goods to the poor, not that you should force someone else to give his.
Christianity also teaches, I found, that each of us should work to provide for ourselves. For example, from the early times, Christian churches experimented with collectivism, at least for a time, with members of the church giving all their worldly possessions to their local Christian church and living communally with all the other members. Well, we know how that worked out. By reading St. Paul's second letter to the early Christian church, it was a letter Paul wrote to them after he had moved on. In that letter, Paul said that he had heard that some of you are walking in idleness. He recalled for them that while he had been with them helping organize their church, he had not eaten anyone's bread without paying. He went on to say, "For even when we were with you, we gave you this command, if anyone will not work, let him not eat." Incentives, it seemed, worked even in early biblical times. Same deal today. St. Paul's experience with socialism mirrors the observations of one of the greatest economists of our time, Thomas Sowell, who criticized his policies driven by good intentions, but blind to downstream consequences. Giving money to the poor without accountability, he warned, tends to foster dependence and incentivize destructive behavior. Doing that is hardly loving your neighbor. Rather, it is more of a form of moral narcissism, helping others as a form of self-gratification, doing things that make us feel more noble, but actually harm rather than help others. Now, Sowell was fond of quoting T.S. Eliot, who said, "Half of the harm that is done in this world is due to people who want to feel important. They justify it because they are absorbed in the endless struggle to think well of themselves." Now, I have urged people for a long time to judge actions not on intentions, but on results, for precisely that reason. Socialism does not do that. Capitalism does. And history teaches that it is the latter, not the former, that promotes good outcomes for people and societies. Now, that is not to deny that at some level we are all collectivist. For example, we support members of our own family for much, if not all, of their lives. Our children are the natural objects of whatever it is we save and accumulate in our lives. We sacrifice for them, give to them, seek what is best for them, even at the severe cost of hardship for ourselves. Sounds a lot like socialism. But as Justice Scalia noted, we do that individually, voluntarily, rather than being required to do it by the all-powerful state. Socialism and charity are not even close to being the same thing. I leave you with this observation. Christ spent none of his time while on earth advocating for one form of government rather than another. He spent amazingly little time feeding the poor. His teachings give little, if any, guidance on what type of government is preferable. Government policy should be based, therefore, not on religious faith, moral posturing, or our good intentions, but rather should be based on the actual results of those policies. Whether rent control or minimum wage policies are good or bad is not a question of religion, but rather a question of whether they create good or bad economic results. What I can tell you without a single doubt is that socialism is not more Christlike than capitalism. And those advocating for socialist policies based on their motives, intentions, or the inherent goodness of their views need to be shunted aside in favor of those who base their policies on good, hard, analytical review of the consequences of those policies. Pure and simple. And that, my friends, is the real story. Wherever you're getting the real story, make sure you subscribe and follow. I'll see you tomorrow.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized, so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.